Next, knowing your audience will help you determine what voice you should use to achieve the proper tone in your essay. Have you considered your audience? For this class, your audience will usually be students at the community college. Factors such as the age, education, and interest of your audience can make a difference in determining which points of your argument you need to stress or which points you need to omit, which ideas need additional explanation, and what kind of language to adopt. Also, give particular attention to those members of the audience who will disagree with your argument. You can consider this group of people your hostile audience, and if you can convince them, you can clearly convince anyone. So, remember to give particular attention to your hostile audience. Most of us who grew up in the United States remember going to kindergarten class as a 5 or 6-year-old and sharing a show and tell experience. I remember bringing a little figurine to class and sharing why it was special to me. Well, when rethinking our body paragraphs, let's invert this idea from show and tell to tell and show. The topic sentence of the body paragraph must be clear and to the point. This is the tell part. The topic sentence should also be clearly connected to your thesis and each of the major points presented in its body paragraph. In other words, each major topic sentence in your essay should further your reader's understanding and thus acceptance of your essay's thesis. To illustrate tell and show, I will use a segment from a former student's essay. First, let's read the sample thesis in pink so that we know what his essay is supposed to be about. Thesis. The United States, a bigger and more powerful nation, denies Puerto Rico of its rights and culture. The U.S. should not govern Puerto Rico as its commonwealth, and instead, Puerto Ricans should be allowed to govern themselves as an independent nation. Notice that this thesis has the essay map discussed on page 40 of the textbook. It points to the different topics the essay will discuss. You will see that the topic sentence directly supports a part of the thesis as it discusses the rights of Puerto Ricans. Topic sentence. One of the many benefits citizens from all democratic countries enjoy is the ability to choose their chief in command. As a commonwealth under the United States, Puerto Rican citizens cannot vote. To support your opinions, you must offer evidence of one or more kinds. You have a variety of options to choose from. You might support one idea by using the experiences of others, such as friends and family. Notice that I said experiences, not opinion. A specific experience is a form of evidence. Opinion is not evidence. In another place in the paragraph, you might choose to cite expert information, such as statistics, quotes, or authorities in a given field. You can also support ideas by using personal experiences. This would mean that you would use the personal pronoun I. But be careful when you use these personal pronouns. We'll discuss this later on. Know that the more convincing the support, the more likely your readers are to accept your opinions as true. Also, when giving evidence, suppress strong emotions, particularly of anger or pity. If you come across to your reader as angry or upset, these emotions can discredit the evidence that is otherwise solid. Let's read the objective example in blue. Puerto Ricans are allowed to participate in the presidential primaries, but not the final event. And now, the emotional example in green. The clutch the U.S. has over Puerto Rico is sickening. It prevents hard-working Puerto Ricans from participating in their God-given right to vote in the final presidential elections. Words like clutch and sickening invoke anger, and words like hardworking invokes unnecessary pity. Notice how the first sounds somewhat objective and professional. In argument essays, you are naturally going to be pushing one point of view, so you'll be biased. But the professional tone makes you seem unbiased, and it invites readers who are reluctant to your ideas into your essay. Possibly the most serious and most common weakness of all essays by novice writers is the lack of effectively unpacking evidence. The information in each paragraph must adequately explain, exemplify, define, or in some other way support the evidence. Vague generalities or repetitious ideas are not convincing. Be specific and resolute in your unpacking. A nice way of unpacking is looking at your evidence and asking yourself, why is this evidence important? Let me ask this question about the sample paragraph. Why is it important for Puerto Ricans to be allowed to participate in presidential elections? The answer is in the unpacked sentences. Let's see the example in blue. This is a frustration to many of the younger generation on the island because they are fighting wars and representing the U.S. while still being denied the privilege to choose their commander-in-chief. The island does have its own elections where they get to choose who will become governor and who will become various members of the political cabinet, but all of these officials have limited power in deciding the fate of the island. Now the last step in the tell and show process. Now that you have introduced the main idea of the paragraph to the topic sentence, and now that you have provided evidence and unpacked that evidence, you're ready to wrap up your main point. The concluding statement of the paragraph should reinforce the topic sentence. So, in the example we read, as an independent nation, Puerto Ricans would have the right to participate in elections, choosing who their leader would be. Now let's see how the entire paragraph looks put together. But first, let's reread the thesis. The United States, a bigger and more powerful nation, denies Puerto Rico of its rights and culture. The U.S. should not govern Puerto Rico as its commonwealth, and instead, Puerto Ricans should be allowed to govern themselves as an independent nation. One of the many benefits citizens from all democratic countries enjoy is the ability to choose their chief in command, but as a commonwealth under the United States, Puerto Rican citizens cannot vote during the presidential campaign. They are allowed to participate in presidential primaries, but not the final event. This is a frustration to many of the younger generation on the island because they are fighting wars and representing the U.S. while still being denied the privilege to choose their commander-in-chief. The island does have its own elections, where they get to choose who will become governor and who will become various members of the political cabinet. But all of these officials have limited power in deciding the fate of the island. As an independent nation, Puerto Ricans would have the right to participate in elections,